very much for the floor. What are you going to hear from the opening government today? First of all, how are private armies actually functioning, about their points, motivation and goals. Secondly, what might happen if we give them too much power, and by power I mean money. And thirdly, about transfer of responsibility from the Western states. Before all of that, I'd like to say that in this debate we are going to talk about an interventions. By that I mean when Western states are going to intervene in some area, etc. We think that this is our debate today. So we think that the Western states should not use private armies when they're going to intervene in some areas. Why? And the main problem in this debate today is too much freedom for those armies. Well, how is all this process functioning? First of all, you gave them money and you sign a contract with them. They will do something for you and you will pay them a lot of money. Why is that problematic? First of all, because private armies are not going to sign those contracts if they cannot have a whole control in their actions. So you won't be able to interrupt them. You will just maybe be able to get some information about what they are doing, but you won't be able to have your own command in these actions. And that's really problematic, as I already said, because we're giving them too much of freedom. My first point here, functioning of the private armies. First of all, what's their motivation? Well, as I already said, their main motivation is money. Why? Because they are doing something, they got paid, and if they have more money than other company, they will be able to have more weapons, etc., and they will be the best on market of private armies, let's call it that way. What's their point? The point of private armies is to end their job as quickly as they can. Why is that so? Because it's logical. They don't want to waste much weapons, much of their men, etc. So they're going to do everything to end those actions as quickly as they can. Why is that problematic now? That might lead to more aggression than if some state did that action that itself. Why? Because those people care less when they are in action. Why is that so? Because they are controlled only by their leaders, and they do what they tell them to do. And as I already explained, their goal is to end it as quickly as they can. So they will not really care about number of victims of what they done. And as I said previously, we don't have any, as a Western state, we don't have any control in this whole process. And furthermore, later please, and furthermore, they're less likely to be prosecuted because you don't actually know their names, you don't actually know their identities, etc. You know identity of probably one person who signed it with you, and it's probably going to be some anonymous guy. So we think that it's harder to prosecute them, and when it's harder to prosecute them, and when they do only what one man says to them, we think that it's going to be, they are going to be more prone to kill whoever they find in their path, so they can finish the job as quickly as they can. Nextly, before I continue, if you want a question.
Yeah, the most efficient wars are the ones in which you kill the most people. You can see Vietnam for that. The most efficient wars are the ones in which you're the smartest about what you're doing and you have the biggest tactic. Private contractors are the ones that have the most expertise in the field.
Well, it's not, because they're doing to finish not the most efficient way, but the fastest way. because they'll be able to do another job. If they finish a job for a year instead of 2 years, they will be able to take another job, finish 2 jobs, and take twice as much money as they would if they did it in most efficient way. So next thing I'm going to talk about is what can happen if we give them that much money. If we give that much money to private armies, they are more able to start conflicts in some areas that they know that they are more likely to happen in those areas. By that I mean countries can start conflicts so they can sell weapons, etc., etc. But we think that private armies are way more inclined to do so because they have more profit of that. If they start a conflict in some area, they will be probably asked to help and to react in this area, so they can earn more money on that. So we think that it's problematic on a couple of levels. First, as I explained, it's more likely to have more victims without any reason. And secondly, they're probably not going to start conflicts everywhere around the world, but as I explained to you, they're more likely to do so than the state itself. So what basically I brought to you today. First, about how are private armies functioning in today's world, their motivations, goals, points, etc., and about what might happen if we give them too much power. My partner is going to talk more about transfer of responsibility, and for the reasons I brought to you and my partner will, I'm more than proud to propose this motion. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister very much and call upon the Leader of the Opposition. There's a labelled speak from there a bit. I think that's so you'll be in the camera. I don't know how much you want to be, but
I'm just going to mix it really quickly if you want.
Yeah, whatever. Gonna see a beautiful back. The proposition seems to operate under the assumption that once we hire some conscripts, we have no control whatsoever over them. They just go in the country and do whatever the hell they want to. I would want to remind dear proposition that 70% of army, what we're going to have, is probably going to be state army, which is there by contract, which is not owned by private sector. And probably most of the officials that are going to be there, which actually lead the country, such as generals and marshals, are going to be hired by our government. And we know exactly what they're doing, and we can easily prosecute them. And they are the ones that give orders to private armies anyway, so we don't see why any of the harms that we heard stand. So then we heard that, well, they probably want to finish as quickly as possible. We don't see that as a harm. I mean, as quickly as possible is as efficiently as possible. It means that less and less civilians are going to be harmed by the war that we actually started fighting. And the problem is, as soon as you walk into a village and start blowing up people for no reason, you're going to have 15 other guerrilla groups, which is going to drag war as long as possible. Therefore, it's very unlikely that they are going to target civilians, because targeting civilians would make the war as long as possible. Therefore, your points do not stand, and I can go to my substantial. My substantial is simple. Firstly, I'm going to briefly touch upon why it's unfair to people who are conscripted, and Laurent is going to expand on that. Then I'm going to talk about wars. Why the wars under this motion are going to be fought less efficiently. Secondly, why it's going to be more atrocities happening. And thirdly, why we will be much more likely to lose political capital and drop out of very necessary wars that we need to be fighting. First, why is it unfair to people who are conscripting? In order to fight a war, and I mean, we have to assume that, you know, if a president of the US wants to go to war with someone, he will go to war with someone, even though there may be not enough people fighting. So he needs to get large enough army in order to enter a conflict. So if you're not hiring private mercenaries, you're going to be hiring someone else. Usually in US Army, what you do, if you go to schools for, you know, where people are not really successful, or you go to more deprived areas, or you go to areas and make people feel that there is nothing in their future. You make them feel like, well, you're not going to get hired anyway. You can try your best into going into Afghanistan and actually becoming a war hero, and then you have something to show to your peers. So that's what we usually do to people. And usually those people who go in the army are those from deprived areas that think that there is nothing else they can do with their lives and think that being a war hero is not the worst thing. So they're young and unexperienced. It's very important for all the wars I'm going to be talking about next. Now, my second point. Why wars that we are going to fight now are going to be less efficient? Well, first, very obvious stuff. So people who are probably be conscripted now are going to be less experienced than people who are private mercenaries. Because, well, we already know the beauty of capitalism, that people have competition over who is the best mercenary company, so they're going to have the most trained people possible, they're going to have the most experienced people possible. So these are people who, first of all, know how to detect, you know, a military object rather than a civilian object, first of all. Secondly, there are people who know how to use military weapons, that probably have experience in other wars, who are less subject to fear, less subject to disguise, and less subject to, you know, to trying to destroy the war in which they are fighting. So now these people who are conscripted, they have A, no training, B, they don't know how to use weapons, and 3, they don't really know how to control their emotions. Therefore, these people are much less efficient at fighting wars. And if we're inefficient at fighting wars, then all of the civilians living in those areas are going to be dragged on in the conflict for ages and ages long, for as long as the war is going to drag on, and that's a massive harm on their side of the house. Secondly, why it's going to lead to less atrocities. That's a bit of a more complex one. So in a war with conscripts, you have to motivate them somehow. So people who are private mercenaries, they are already motivated enough by money. Secondly, they probably have enough experience. And thirdly, they really like war as itself. So when you're motivating conscripts to fight, you're trying to make them as efficient as possible. So you're trying to motivate them by threat. For example, you're saying that if we don't attack this country, then this country is going to attack us. Or you motivate them by love to their nation. Or you motivate them by dehumanizing other people, like it happened in Vietnam. When people entered and say they're all Viet Cong, and this My Lai village, I mean, they're all full of Viet Cong, and you have to destroy all of them, because otherwise they're going to go to your country and kill your girlfriend and, you know, torture all the friends that you know. So this is reason number 1 to commit atrocities. So these reasons are fear and disgust for those people, which happens out of dehumanization. So largest amounts of atrocities that happen in Vietnam, it most happen by unexperienced conscripts that don't really know what they're doing. First of all, they cannot tell a civilian from a non-civilian. So they don't really know if a person in front of them is actually a terrorist or not a terrorist. So they're just killing everybody that they see. Well, secondly, they're much more likely to feel rage, and, you know, because they're motivated by the fear and the love of their country. So they're much more likely to feel that those people in front of them are horrible people. So they're much more likely to commit rape, to commit torture, and to actually attack non-military objects, thinking that these people are terrorists. Which is not the case with private hired mercenaries, because when we hire mercenaries, then these people are experienced, they know how to tell good from bad. Secondly, they're not that emotionally driven, because their motivations lie above everything that we're talking about in young and experienced conscripts. And they will not shoot a civilian, therefore less atrocity is going to happen. Therefore less, obviously, civilians are going to be harmed, then less guerrillas are going to be formed as a result in those countries, and obviously less human capital is going to be lost. Before we move on, yes?
Yeah, what about another quality which is important in war? It's called loyalty. Don't you want to know who's fighting next to you, who's giving your life for your home country too?
Okay, the thing is, they are also probably American citizens. So it's another private company which is hiring American citizens, and they probably also want to, you know, protect America. I'm sorry for using America as an example. I just like, you know, picking one thing. So the thing is, so you are an American state, and you want to hire people. There are some people working for you for the government, and some people working for private companies. They're still all American citizens, and they still all want to defend your country, and they're still obviously loyal to you because they're still within that country. Now, thirdly, fourthly, drop out because of the loss of political capital. Now, the problem with wars such as Iraq is the way that we entered them, that we threw away the government, and then we didn't have any other political capital in order to continue doing whatever was there. Because all the people within the country just said, you know, get out of that war, save our children, we don't want our people to be in that country, just get out of it as soon as possible. Therefore, we dropped everything, whatever we were doing, and they just went back to America. Because we just didn't want to fight anymore, because people didn't want to fight anymore. And that's the biggest problem. Not only in the wars that we already started, conflict, but the wars that we might fight in order to save people from atrocities, in order to save people from dictatorships. So you have to stay in and ensure peace. You cannot just enter in, just drop everything out, and and just leave. And the biggest problem is when people have these sons who've been conscripted by the thing I was already talking about. When they have those people already hired, the mothers and wives are very, very likely to go there and say, get our sons out of that place immediately. And that's why we drop out of wars. It doesn't happen with private mercenaries, because their life is war, and obviously the mothers are not going to go, get up and get my son out of war, because he's already, within that, he's already motivated by it. As a result, you will not drop out of necessary wars, because it's just a weird policy to implement. I'm very happy with the others.
I'd like to thank the previous speaker very much and welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the case for open government.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a contradiction on the side of the opposition, which is claiming that their whole story is based upon the fact that this is a job just like any job that needs to be done professionally, and then they tell us that yes, we will be allowed to actually interfere with this. Guess what? We won't, and we haven't been. And they are telling us about how we are going to be able to control these people. Why are we not going to be able to control these people? Here's an example. You had Black Hawks, which is a very famous private military. Once they committed certain things that they shouldn't have committed and started being rejected by governments for hiring, they just switched their name to the academy and everybody started hiring them again. So we do not see that you will be able to actually control those people enough and well enough, because in the war zones, we from the side of the government, we say yes, you might not even be able to control your own army to the extent that you want, but you are still going to be much more able to control them, much more able to prosecute them, and much more able to actually see what's going on there, and we see that as a huge benefit. So what other thing is, they're telling us that these people that actually voluntarily come into the army, they tell us that they're not successful enough and they are poor. Not true. Not all of them are. Even if that's true, we still see that more not successful people or more poor people will be actually will be motivated to go into war because they will be attracted by huge amounts of money. Here, you have people who are still willing to kind of develop themselves, because the Americans, for example, give out their soldiers right to education and stuff like that. So we see that those people will still be willing to strive. And even more important, those people are the people who are not willing to commit their whole life to the war, which we see very important, because that actually kind of influences the personality of those soldiers in private armies to the extent that they actually use their human side, which we see as the most important thing in this debate. Yes, they also tell us about the less subject to fear. I will come to this later. And about the losing political capital, we see that the wars that the state chooses to fight are something that regards every citizen. And if the citizens are not happy with those wars that need to be fought, it is their right as the citizens which fund this army and which have chosen this government to say, we do not want this war. Yes, maybe there will be some retreat, but you still have other countries that can intervene. There is a very little possibility that at one point and at one certain war, you will have all Western countries that will refuse to intervene. Even if that is so, you still have UN as something that is above even the Western states, which will enforce this. Even if it does not happen, we still see that it's better for us not to fight unnecessary wars rather than fight maybe unnecessary wars, or even fight those necessary wars in a terrible way and miss out on the point of all of it. So what you're going to get from me today is, first of all, the difference between the hired and soldiers who volunteer, and why is this so relevant. We have heard from them that these people will be able to finish the job the most quickly, the most efficiently, and they are well trained. It does not have to be like that. Why? Maybe they will make the war the most efficient, but in order for you to complete the war most efficiently, you need to make certain sacrifices, such as killing the civilians, such as destroying the infrastructure of those people, and it will still have huge consequences in that society, and we still see that as much worse thing than having an army which is kind of having a slower progress in those wars, but is still making certain achievements. Also, they tell us why is it so relevant that these people actually agreed to... Okay, before I continue, yes.
Private companies have an incentive to provide with people who commit the least atrocities, kill least people, and are the most efficient at fighting wars. Why would government be bad?
Here's why not. Because when you enter a war as a state, you are subjected to an international law, which requires you to follow the rules of war. We do not see that those rules of war will be that applicable to these private armies. Like we have previously explained, most of those soldiers probably signed certain contracts of, I don't know, not telling everyone what happened. Those people are motivated by money, and if that company is paying me, I am pretty sure I am not going to get out to public and say this is what they have done, because then I will lose my job. What's the difference between that and soldiers? People who fight for their own country feel like they have certain bigger interests besides money. Those people will return home as war heroes. Those people will be appreciated. Those people will be thanked by other people who have saved them. All those are senses of accomplishment which are much more important to you, even if that... and that also includes you being emotional. We do not see that emotional is bad, because you need to sympathize with the people that you are actually trying to help, and not be just a killing machine or the most efficient machine. We see that it's much more important, and later on, when you actually get to the part when the war is over, we still feel that it will be much easier for Western countries to establish relations with people, with the states they have intervened in, and you do not have such a terrible like opinion of them, because even though you hire those people and they commit certain things, you are much less held liable, but you will still have to. You might be able to say, okay, we have not known about this, but there is still the damage is done, because those states that you have intervened in will have a severe bad opinion about you, and it will transfer also to other things that you do, and that's where you lose your political capital. And in this case, once you know that you can better control your state, because you can prosecute your own people, you can actually control what's really going on. You have people who are not motivated only by money. You have people who want to be perceived as someone who has done something good, and those people will be much more conscious of their own actions, and those people are much less likely to commit those damages they have told us about. For all these reasons, please propose. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the previous speaker very much, and welcome the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my speech, I will talk about what will happen in a country that wants to fight a war without it having private contractors in its army. But first of all, I will bring 4 points of rebuttal. So my first point of rebuttal is about this thing about giving too much power to private armies, and it's a very ridiculous idea that we will start conflicts and that there will be no rules of war anymore. We think that this is completely not true, right? Because when a private person starts a conflict in a foreign country and engages in act of war, that person is called a terrorist, which means that it's highly unlikely that any Western state will actually start paying its company or engage in that war when that person is clearly a terrorist. That also applies for acts of war that private contractors engage in during wars. those are just private people engaging in these wars, right? So if they do kill a civilian, for instance, which you think will happen less, but even if they do that, they will be a private person who is completely, like, we are able to prosecute, even a private company. It is the reason why there is a very complex and like very servolotic, like international criminal law, and that doesn't actually work. It's because it's much harder to prosecute states rather than individuals. When you have to prosecute a state, it's very, very hard because that state has sovereignty. When it's a private company or a private person that commits an atrocity, it is much easier for the state where that person comes from, or for the state in which that atrocity has been committed, to prosecute them in a normal civilian court, like a normal private person who kills someone. So that point's forward. No, thank you. My second point of rebuttal is about this like thought of private contractors as emotionless killing machines and how that is bad. Maybe we'll be emotionally killing machines. But why is it bad? Because we're trained to only kill the enemy. Because it is the enemy, because it is their job to kill the enemy. We're also trained to end the war in the most efficient way, in a less costly way. When you go into a house and instead of killing a terrorist, you kill a child, for instance, that will lead to an enormous backlash for the population. That will lead to more days of war, more months of war. That will lead to more ammunition being spent, more people needing to fight that war, more money for the company. A company does not want that because we're actually engaging into making profits out of this war, which means it will have more incentive to only send people that can deal with the situation. The reason why soldiers from the US Army, for instance, in Iraq, go into houses and start killing little girls rather than killing, for instance, terrorists, it's because they do not know how to deal with the situation. It's because when they go into a house in a situation of danger, they're scared, they have no idea what they're doing, and they see somebody moving in the shadows, they think it might be a terrorist or it might not be a terrorist. In the just heat of the moment, they just shoot. A very trained person will not make that mistake, or even if they do that, they will make that mistake in a less number of cases because they're more trained. Third, about loyalty, when you work for a company and are paid, you're loyal enough, and it's in a more rational way. We think that irrational and a gut feeling of loyalty can actually be very counterproductive and dangerous because it can lead to the sticking of those narratives that Evelyn told you about dehumanizing the enemy and make people think that everybody in that country is the enemy and you should kill everybody. When you're actually rational and your own loyalty lies into the war that is being fought, it is less likely that you will actually buy into those dangerous and wrong narratives. Fourth, about control and prosecution, I already talked a little bit about this. It's actually easier to prosecute private people rather than people in the military, because when you have to prosecute a soldier, you need to use a military court, which is much less transparent than a public, normal civilian court, which means that actually people will have even less trust. That's what happens right now in the US, right? Because when a soldier commits an atrocity, you have no idea what will happen to that soldier, because it will be, with a military court, nothing happens, you have no what to do. You have no idea what happened. More on that also, a state in this case will have less of an incentive to do cover-ups when atrocities do happen. Why? Because it's not the state itself that committed the atrocity, it is a private company. They can put the blame on who did it. When an atrocity is committed by a US soldier, it is a very big point of shame for the government itself, which means that they do cover-ups. It's not that those atrocities don't happen, because it's just impossible to not make them happen when you send 18-year-old kids who have no idea what to do in a conflict zone. They will just cover them up and do nothing about it. But moving on to what will happen in a country that wants to fight a war without private contractors. Also, how does that get soldiers right now? Well, there are career soldiers, which are around 5% of the soldiers. We have private contractors, and then we have kids who see no other choice for themselves rather than that of joining the army. So when you take out group 2, you will need a hell of a lot more of group 3 to make up for those missing private contractors. The government seems to live in a fantasy world that wars will just stop or somebody else will fight them for you. No, right? That's not realistic, because wars are fought for larger reasons and interests than those of the working class or the people fighting that war, of the soldiers you sent to war. You saw that in the Vietnam War. Even if thousands of soldiers were dying, people that were engaging in the war didn't actually care because there were larger interests at stake. Also, there are wars that should be fought. Even if you involve the UN takes its soldiers from private countries, so you will still need those kids who see no future to fight wars for you. We think that it's just naive to think that will not happen. So what will happen when wars are fought and you need soldiers? What about these soldiers? So group 3 3, those kids will need to make it up. How? 2 ways. 1, conscription, the easiest way, Vietnam War style. 2, a more subtle way of getting young kids. So we see it happening in the US right now, where US Army officials go into high schools in marginalized areas and show them the army as the only option they have. And they lure kids into the army. It's not a real choice, right? Because we give them no other option. This will even increase. Why? Because the state will have bigger of an incentive to actually make sure these kids will really not have any other choice. Because we need more kids to go into their army to fight their wars. Why is that bad? Well, first of all, it's completely unfair, right? Because the marginalized in our society will stay even more marginalized. Why? Incentive to do it at the beginning, so that they will have a higher incentive to actually join the army in the first place. Plus, you will have a higher group of marginalized people in the future. Why? Because you will have veterans with no future, right? Because when you take a kid that who's 18-year-old, like poor education, has nothing about the war, put him in a war, take him out of a war, and put him in society, what can that kid do? We think that that is a huge harm, not only for the kid in question, but it's a huge harm for society, because you lose productive young people in your society that could contribute to the economy in your society just to fight wars for you, when you could hire much more efficient private contractors that could do it, who actually want to do it and are trained to do it. Plus, you will have the cost of like welfare and rehabs for all those people that will come back. Whereas when you have private contractors that do it, like you pay them, but at the same time, it is actually their job, so they're actually there to do it for real. So because all the benefits on Prop just aren't true, and because it will lose to worse wars and to more like kid soldiers, please oppose. And this kid's like 18-year-old plus.
I'd like to thank the speaker very much, indeed everybody in the top half of the debate. I shall call the government member to open the case for DGJA.
Thanks for the floor. So first, I think we all in that room agree that wars, for lots of reasons, are a really, really bad thing. And we, on those side of the bench, we want to, if we have to fight wars, then that they have to last as short as possible, that they have to be as less violation and as less hurt of people as possible. And I think for some reasons, this goal you reach better when you follow the government bench. But when I come to our big extension, why it is good to give a war a face. Why it is bad to have soldiers, to have these mercenaries who are faceless and with whom people don't feel empathetic, and which will lead to longer wars. I want to do a little bit of rebuttal. The opposition came up here 2 times with the point that this will lead to not educated 18-year-old boys who will fight in Vietnam or in other states. So first of all, most countries spend more money on their military on the military system than they spend on public health. So usually the soldiers in the country, they are trained, they get good education, they get good things they can use in the field. So they are not sent into battle after 2 weeks. So we think this is not that much there's much experience you get when you are a soldier, that it's not that necessary in a war, that you also can be trained. About the code and how to punish the mercenaries, then we can say, yes, we do have military courts. So when you do a crime in war, yes, we agree that it's sometimes hard to follow the people who did it. But this depends on the war. That depends on the field of war, that the country in which the war takes place.
place is destroyed, and it's in general really hard to find these people. This is not a thing between soldiers and between the mercenaries. So this is a fact you have when there's war in a country. Another point you made really empathetic was the 18-year-old boys who are lost for the society when they fight in war. And we think, yeah, it is a really bad thing, but maybe it is in some case good to give these people who fight in the war a face. And this is how I come up to our big point. So, unfortunately, for lots of politicians, war is not just war in first case. It can be a big step in their career. We have seen it with Bush in America, we have seen it in other wars. So first of all, for the politicians and for the countries, they want the war to go on, and we think one thing to prevent it to last that long and to cause as much of harm, it is that the people in the country where the soldiers come from, they want to lead this war to an end. And we think when every person knows a person who's fighting in the war in that country, I know it's my neighbor, I know it's a friend, I know it's my relative, then I feel engaged with those people. Then I also feel engaged with the people from the other side, because I know they are also relatives, they are also brothers and sisters, and I can feel the pain I feel when I know one of my relatives is fighting in war, and I damn want this war to come to an end. And we think that this is a pressure you sometimes need to come to the media, to make the people know how the world is going on. And people work like that. You are more empathetic, you care more when you see in the TV and the media that there are people fighting like you, that the boy next door is fighting and not some mercenary. Then you care, then you want to make this world end, this war end, and then there can be the pressure to force the politicians to sit on the table and make peace, which the thing is that after a war, usually there's a question, why did they make peace just now? Why didn't they do it half a year before? And we think this half a year before time will come sooner, as sooner the people can feel empathetic, the people know that their neighbors are fighting and that they want to end this war.
Yes. What is better, in your opinion? Millions and millions of citizens, of young kids dying so that a war ends up a little bit earlier, or having mercenaries doing the job more quickly, more efficiently, with less people being dead, and still the same outcome? The war ends up earlier.
And that's the difference. For us, all people count. We neither want the 18-year-old boy to die, and we neither want the mercenaries to die. We want to end the wars, and we think it is better to end the wars faster when you make people in the home countries disagree with that war, because they have the power through the media just to tell that they don't agree, and they know the price this war is going to take their home country. This war is going to take both sides a price, and that they want to come this to an end. I will take a closing.
In the asymmetrical wars that we have today, don't you think that even if I accept your case, don't you think it's more important to have actual professionals in the field rather than having your boy next door?
That's the point they made as well. But we think that is not that difference between that professionals. When you are going through the army, then you are trained for years. Then you also have your education and not sent after 2 weeks. So maybe there is a little difference, but I think it doesn't count that much. And this in the world today, you mentioned, it is also a thing that we have more and more technical standards. So the experience you are talking about is that you know how to do it with that gun, how to deal with this or that, and I think therefore the time should reach, and they also can know it, and it's not that difference between the people who are in the army and the people who are mercenaries. What is the difference between the mercenaries? That they they are people who do it for the money. And when you do something for money, then we think it's a very humanless reason that you can feel empathetic to people who live there. That was a kind of the first government also mentioned, that they feel less empathetic to the people in those countries, and you feel less empathetic to the one who's fighting next to you. That's what I said in my POI. When we have to fight wars, then it is important that you can trust each other in the field. It is a bad way to let mercenaries there stand you can't trust. And for all those reasons, that we want to have a war of faith, that we want to make the people end the war and last it as short as possible, we beg you to propose here.
I'd like to thank the previous speaker very much and call upon the opposition member to open the team behind you.
Just say something.
Okay.
Say stuff. May I? We think there's a huge problem with what Prop is saying, because what they're really finding very difficult is to define the criteria by which they separate a professional soldier, whom, let me remind you, we pay and he goes to the army for money, and a mercenary, as we call it, or what we like to call a contracted soldier and a contracted professional soldier. We completely agree with First Up. We think they did a great job in explaining why we need, what is good about those contracted soldiers. What we're going to bring you is two main questions that I think were lacking in their analysis, which is, firstly, are the soldiers really unqualified to do those jobs? And secondly, what kind of wars are actually that we're going to are actually making us use those kind of contractors, use those kind of professional contractors? Because I think there's an agreement across the bench that yes, when you're contracted, you're more professional, and when you're a soldier, you've got other qualities, let's say. So, well, before I'll get to my point, I'd like to talk about a few rebuttal points. Look, as I said, what we find a major problem with First Prop is that they're really finding it hard to define the criteria between a professional soldier and a contracted soldier and such. What First Prop would try to say that, oh look, soldiers got other motivations because later they'll be heroes. So let me tell you something. In wars today, we don't have heroes anymore. We hardly have any of those face-to-face battles, one army in front of the next or anything like that. We've got people pushing buttons, we've got people using sticks and gears, and we've got people developing better devices in order to fight in a more holistic way. Those people never get credited a lot of time because their work is actually undercover. They can't promote their names, and therefore the hero thing just doesn't stand. What Second Prop is trying to say, look, at the end of the day, it's the loyalty to your comrades. And I agree. And I think just necessarily the thing of the loyalty to your comrades really actually tells you that there's no real difference between this contracted soldier and the professional soldiers, because they still work in a unit. A lot of time they work in an organic unit of the army. They work for much longer time than the soldiers that are actually in the field that are going to a mission for a few months. And therefore, they actually have that loyalty to the comrades, even if it's not the brotherly arms that we learn to accept, but something that happens on a professional level. So we don't see how that's anything of a problem. And also a main problem with Second Prop is that what she's saying basically, look, there's no difference in the training between the two soldiers, but there's a difference in our reaction. So you're saying it's going to hurt me more when I see a boy in uniform rather than I see a boy in the uniform of the company. You're saying that there's some major difference in the public outcry that there's going to be when we lose 50 soldiers and when we lose 50 contracted soldiers. I don't see how that's going to happen. I would really love for you guys to explain it to me, because I think that death in the Western democracies is really sad either way, and we tend to react to it in a kind of the same way regardless of who really dies. I can tell you from a country where civilians die, we actually tend to care more even about civilians that die rather than soldiers, because we've got this ethos of soldiers are actually there to protect us, while civilians didn't necessarily have to die. To get to my positive, look, there was a question that was left kind of unsaid. Look, are the professional soldiers really untrained to do this? Well, it's just
that the army, it's not that they're not trained, but, and this is answering to Prop 2, and I think Prop 2 is wrong. I think there is a major difference in the training. Because look, when a normal army is just not built today to do that professional work that we're talking about in contracted soldiers. Because you get a lot of broad training. You spend a lot of time on soldiering, like the morning routines, the evening routines, all that kind of stuff. You do a lot of physical tests, even if it's not relevant to your work. And these are just two examples of tons of training you do that isn't necessarily relevant to your profession, which makes you a less professional soldier at the end of the day. In the army, you only stay for a limited time because a lot of times you want to go to university and you're only using this as a stepping stone to get out from your position. And therefore, again, less time, less focused, makes you a less professional soldier. And why do we need those professional soldiers? Because what kinds of wars are we talking to? And first what I actually started saying is, we're intervening in a civilian territory. We're working in asymmetrical wars. Okay, we do need those more specialized contractors. It's a civilian territory. A lot of times what we're intervening against is an organization that uses civil population, and also its soldiers are very, very ideological and very, very committed. Trust me, no one in ISIS gets any promises to go to college later or like a really, really big sum of money. They really, really, really don't. Okay? So what more do we have to develop in order to face such ideological, very, very committed people? We have to be smart. We have to we have to be technological because we need less damages to our soldiers. For example, smart bombs that are also preventing collateral damage. For example, intel devices that are actually allowing us to gather intel against intel that isn't available to achieve by a person. If you don't want, I'll take first.
It is much more likely for the state army to have those because they have monopoly over the new ideas. They also have much more money, and they're not willing to give them up to private armies.
Clearly you don't know the army, okay? I've been there. They do not have a monopoly on knowledge. Knowledge develops a lot faster in a much less bureaucratic organization than the army, in an organization that is on the free market, therefore has a lot more money and can offer a lot more money to the brightest minds available. No, the army isn't, it's good, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just not the best. It's not specialized, and if we want to protect our people, and if we want to do that, then we need specialized. Okay, we need professional and experienced soldiers, like the contracted soldiers. Okay, because unlike like we talked about, most professional soldiers only do one short mission for a very short amount of time, while the contracted soldiers, they stay for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. They get to know the territory a lot better. They get to know the people and the population a lot better. Yes, they are less likely to make any damages that isn't what we were planning to do. And no, unlike what Prop is thinking, the army is definitely not the best place to develop that kind of ability. It can't develop that kind of ability because it has to invest in the routines I already talked about, and that's why we think that at the end of the day, contracted soldiers are what we need because of the wars we're fighting, and because we can't really train our soldiers to fight those wars anymore. Therefore, we want
I'd like to thank the previous speaker very much for their fine remarks and call upon government witnesses to make the case for government there.
I'd like to sum up this debate for the government bench by raising 3 questions. First, who are the soldiers that are fighting today? Secondly, who is going to be a private contractor? And third question, to having less war should be our goal, right? But first 2 points of rebuttal. We just heard from the second opposition, well, we, as the second government, didn't explain the difference in the reaction by the people if a soldier or contractor dies. Well, first of all, you should have listened to your first opposition, because they already claimed that there is a difference and that it will harm actually the states, because it's not easy anymore to go to war. So we actually heard from your side of the house that it's no problem. But I'm going to give you a little bit more of explanation. For example, the media will tell us if young Americans are actually, I'm continuing speaking about America because this, great example for the whole case. When Americans actually fall on the field in foreign countries. Of course they do, because the people are interested if Americans are going to die, right? But if they are just some employees of some company that might even be abroad, why should the media actually cover that up, right? So we believe it's pretty obvious that it's more media attention to actually young Americans dying than to some other guys. Besides, there is they are flying back the coffins of our soldiers, there are big funeral celebrations, all kind of stuff. So we really embrace actually our soldiers. So of course we have a lot of empathy towards that, and we believe of course the burden will be a lot higher if we actually have more of our soldiers dying instead of some other guys. The second thing you said that made me what's kind of funny, because you said, well, as of right now we have more asymmetric wars, and then you said it's just about pushing the button. At the bottom. And then you said, on the other hand, we need a lot of specialists. But why do we need specialists in order to just push a button? I don't really, that's kind of confusing. So now let's talk about real situation, and for my first point, who are the soldiers that fight today? We believe we heard a misinterpretation from the first opposition when they told us only young, unsuccessful pupils who are unexperienced. Tina already told us that they are not only trained for 2 weeks, that they actually have a great training in the military, right? So it's not like in the 20th century anymore, where you have only stupid soldiers who can just die for a couple of days and afterwards there's the real combat. No, today, of course, we need soldiers. They are well equipped. It's costly, right? So it costs the military a lot of money to fly them into other countries. So of course they don't want that they're being killed right away. That would just be stupid and insufficient. But of course it's not like that. So we believe that the state cares because they are well trained and equipped. But what is the great thing about military? There is companionship, there are checks and balances, and of course there's a hierarchy. And we believe this is very important, and it's exclusively to military, right? Because a private company doesn't have all that. Tina told us there's your soldier next to you, which is like your brother, because you know that he also knows the same rules, he also had the same training as you, and if you look besides you and you see your brother, like your soldier, that you're fighting with him for the same idea, for your same country, it's a huge different story than you just fighting for someone because he gives you money and next to you is another guy who also wants money. It's not like the connection between the soldiers as strong as we see it in the military, and we believe this leads to the checks and balances. For example, we believe that there are certain norms, like they will control each other towards misbehavior, right? Because they are trained in the same way, they know the same hierarchy, they also know the same morals and the same standards they stand by, because they're trained together, and that's all that they heard during their training. So it will be less likely that they actually cross the boundaries, because if they do so, there's a brother next to them, and the brother is more likely to tell them, well, what you just did was completely wrong, besides some other guy who's just getting paid by the same company, right? So we believe it's less likely to have crimes. Second point, who's going to be the private contractor? Well, again, misinterpretation of first opposition telling us, well, they are less likely to make mistakes. Instead, we believe there's a strong incentive to actually hide mistakes, because the company wants to be hired in the future. And we believe people who really like to fight and kill will actually join those private companies. But without all the values I talked about, with all the reason, without a loyalty to each other and to the country, and we believe this is very wrong, and you could say they are more like killing machines. And we say this lack of loyalty Tina talked already about could lead to desertation, so that they're just running away. It could lead to spying, all bad stuff. So we say it's an old model in history, but we don't need it right now, because today we have a democracy, and today we have the people that shall decide, and we say the people have to know the price, like Tina pointed out. They have to know what's the price, like how many guys come back in a coffin, and not just hiding away because it's some company doing the dirty work, right? We believe it's important that the people in the society actually can choose and decide, and they only can do it if they know the truth. The truth being, our sons, our brothers have to fight for us, and they might die. No, thank you. So this leads me directly to the third point. The only thing that matters, we also heard that from the first opposition, the public opinion. But we turned it around and said the public opinion is yes, exactly what we want. We want exactly that. We want that the people in our liberal societies actually decide if they want to go to war or not. And for doing that, they just they just have to know the price. What's wrong?
At the point in which you have already entered the war, is it better to finish taking the dictator down in an efficient way, or drop out of it in the middle because there are some people crying over a neighbor's son?
Okay, we are like actually talking about the future. We want to prevent future wars, right? But of course, if we're gonna end them right now, that's fine. I mean, if you have one less combat right now, that's also fine. But of course, we have to. For example, in your example you gave about Vietnam, right? Of course, it would have been good to go out of Vietnam half a year before that. Of course, it would have been great. We believe in the future we will have less wars with our model, and we believe we don't need to have, we need to have the soldiers who actually have all the training, stand by each other, and actually know the importance of having rules of the companionship and all that. So on one side of the house, like on our side, you have the hierarchy, you have people who are trained, who have values and stuff, and on your side of the house, you have just money-greedy killing machines who care for nothing else besides their payment, right? And we believe, why can't they, if it's so great, why can't they not just join our military in the future? I mean, they could get used to the training, to the hierarchy, all that, but they're not gonna, I mean, they don't, apparently they don't want to do it right now, and you didn't give us a reason for that. I don't see it, so maybe the second opposition can tell us, if they are so great trained, why can they not just join the military and adapt to the rules, follow the values? We believe this could work out in the future, but we should ban it altogether if they are not able to follow our rules, because the people who die for our country should actually be people who die for our country and not for their own greed. We believe this is important, so I'm very proud to propose.
I'd like to thank the President Government Speaker very much and call upon the Opposition Whip to say the words.
I'm going to sum this together one main theme, the kind of war that we're having nowadays, which makes it necessary to us to use very specialized units in order for the battles to be efficient. This will be my main point. I have quite a rebuttal. We are that those soldiers contract soldiers being sent aren't accountable to the international law, which is of course not true. Those soldiers live under the Geneva Convention, otherwise they cannot be sent to those places. Secondly, we're hearing the fact that those people that we're gonna send are gonna be machine murder machine. Why? Because of the fact that they're there just because of the fact that they want money, and they're gonna be so used and thrilled about killing people. Because that's the fact. Now, first of all, we say several things to that. The soldiers in the United States Army, like Nata previously said, go get paid too with the United States, and most armies in Western liberal democracies are professional as well. They just operate under the whole army as one unit and not outsourcing it, which it should, because of that I'm going to say in addition. But secondly, what leads many soldiers to commit war crimes isn't the fact that they're a bunch of sadistic people. What leads people to commit war crimes is the fact that they're unprofessional, the fact that they fear for their lives, and therefore they don't know what to do. When someone is looking at you and you're not quite sure if he's a terrorist or so your instinct is to shoot him. But when you send specialized people who have been to war much times, they have much more tendency to make the right decision because of the fact that they are already used to that. They have been much more trained, they have been much more time in the No, in the army. In addition, they say to us, oh, they're going to be incentivized just because of the money. And therefore, I ask you, why not put a criteria? And it's because of the fact that Western liberal democracies want the less amount of casualties, less amount of domino effect. Therefore, the criteria that government is going to be using in order to judge and assess it and evaluate those units need and will have criteria based on this thing, how much casualties are we going to have, how much damage. And see, in addition, that I already told you that they're not going to be making strategic goals, just specialized tactic decisions which they have the specialty to make. Last, you have talked in a second government, your whole case is about your preference in preventing wars. And I asked you, okay, even if you don't, even if we accept that people tend to care more about people with the U.S. Uniform. Why is that good? I claim that is a market failure. The amount of people died in Iraq was 3,000 or 4,000 soldiers, which isn't that much. People die every day in car accidents, and we care less about them. But the people that died because of the fact that we are not intervening in war, that we need to, just like happening now in Syria, is just the fact because we don't want to prevent every other war. We want to prevent the war that we're not taking that decisions from the people themselves. We're just making sure that they want to be biased against every man dying. Now, to my positive point, which we net into the table, the kind of wars that we're having nowadays. But first, yes.
Syria is another example because this is a war which is fight from fundamental religious people. But in all other wars, it is more likely to pressure people to do diplomatic work when you have the media and the people at home who want to do that.
Okay, sometimes you're making your whole case about that the fact that you want to prevent war each and every time. This can happen. Most of the conflicts nowadays require a military intervention. Between democratic countries, we have not seen a war ever since the Second War. So in most cases, we do need to make certain actions. Now for my positive point. The kind of wars we're having today, we're now having these asymmetric wars which need very specialized units. Which units? The units that me and Nata are talking about. Most of the soldiers that are being recruited in those units, because of some of them, most of them, are retired soldiers with high criteria. They are very smart people. They have shown their abilities in some units in the army, but they get much better in those units because of the fact that that's just how private market works, and you obviously don't understand it. You ask us, why can't the army do that? Oh, and I say to that, why can't the country eliminate the private sector and run everything? Because the country don't know how to do that. The armies are a huge corporation, doesn't know how to do everything, especially in the kind of war that me and Nat are talking about, asymmetric wars in which you need a specific unit that know what's happening in that country, have specialization, not only on military things, but know what's happening in this country between the people, how to make sure that there is no casual losses, and how exactly to make your tactics. What's the thing that you need? Which kind of weapon is more effective? Which tactic you need to do in order to make sure that you that the local people won't turn against you when you have that kind of speciality, based on the knowledge that you have. When you have the best soldiers that are smart, that have the best guns, and so it will lead to much efficient wars with much less casualties, and because of the fact that the modern ones need much more special units, we call it to oppose.